Thank you for joining in another informational video from Salzano Custom Concrete. This is the second part of a small series that we're doing on cracks in concrete. I wanted to show you the first part was about a traditional sidewalk, and this is the way most concrete would be designed and built. This is like in part one we showed you a sidewalk that's a little bit more narrow than this. This particular one is about 5 or 6 feet wide. The spacing on these control joints is longer because it's wider. We're essentially making squares, and again, exactly like we showed in part one, concrete cracks, let's call it a 100% chance. Concrete cracks, 95% of the time it's going to be down in these grooves where you don't see it. That's the purpose of these grooves. So there's two different ways basically to prevent cracks from being visible. This is the most common way, is these control joints. You'll see this in a driveway, you see it in stamped concrete, plain concrete. The concept has been around 100 years. There's another concept, and I'm standing here near a pool. This is closed for the winter, but we're going to peek through the fence here and show you the other technique for controlling visible cracks is these white, they're called deck strips, these white plastic strips. These essentially are here to make these slabs of concrete smaller. So the smaller a slab of concrete is, the less likely it is to cracking. So if we make the slabs smaller and smaller and smaller, you get to the point where it's so unlikely to crack, then this is the purpose of these white strips, where essentially this big slab, you had a couple thousand square feet of concrete out here on this pool deck, but each of these smaller squares divided by these white joints is there something on the order of, let's call it 10 feet square, 8 by 10, it looks like something like that. So these squares are small enough where by themselves they're not likely to crack. So if you look on one side of that white deck strip, the concrete doesn't know that the concrete is there on the other side. So from one side of that deck strip to the other, those are completely independent slabs of concrete. One side doesn't know the other side's there because it's completely divided. Those white deck strips are about 4 inches tall. You're only looking at the top band, about a ½ inch wide, but that strip goes all the way down inside the concrete to completely isolate one, what's now a separate slab from the other. And again, we make those small enough by doing these deck strips, then the concrete is less likely to crack. And it looks pretty effective on this particular pool deck. I can't from here see any random hairline cracks, and that's because it's been divided up by these joints. Now, interestingly, the other part of this pool deck, if you look on this other side, I'm going to go around the other side, they've decided, and I don't know why, to use the traditional control joints over here. So instead of the deck strips, you can see the deck strips on the one side of the pool, and then over here, looks like they've poured an expanded area, and they have the traditional control joints. Now the concept here, like we said in video part one, is that here it is all one slab, but we're weakening the concrete along these control joints, and we want the crack to occur down in those grooves so you don't see it. I can't see any from here. Well, I can actually. There's a crack that runs along in the joint right here, in the joint right over here, and you can see the crack. This is what we don't want to see, is the crack jumped out, and you can see right there on a bit of a 45-degree angle, and this happens. Remember I said concrete's 95% likely to follow those control joints, but here's a case. This is the other 5%. This happens, and if you're thinking about buying concrete or have concrete and you have this situation, it's part of buying concrete. You can't buy something with the risk of cracking and get mad if the concrete cracks. You have to be okay with it. There is a repair, there's an epoxy injection that can be done, and really it's just for aesthetics, to make it blend in and look a little bit nicer. But again, it's a 100% chance, let's call it, the concrete cracks. 95%, either will be in these control joints, or in the case of the pool deck over there, probably not likely, 95% unlikely to crack because we're making those slabs smaller. So again, in summary, two different ways to prevent visible cracks. One is the traditional control joints like these. We've prevented a visible crack, by directing the crack to happen. Here it is right here, again, down in these control joints. Very successful right there. The other technique is the white plastic deck strips that you see. Most of the time you see these in a pool. So anyway, that's it for now. Again, concrete cracking, part 2. Thanks again for joining in this video, and look for yet another iteration with some information, additional information on this topic. Thanks again.